Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Marta Heisel-Wiśniewska, and I'm an architect, urban planner, and lecturer at the architecture department at Cornell University. Today, I will be very briefly talking about a few principles of circular economy and sustainability from the perspective of my profession, meaning architect, builder, educator. I was also asked to set a tone for this session and symposium, but I have to warn you, it will not be a very positive one. But we are here for a reason. We know that obviously there are a lot of areas that do not work really well on our planet, and that calls for quick and radical change. Next slide, please. It is predicted that by early to 2050s, we'll cross the threshold of 10 billion people on our globe. For that, we'll have to secure a lot of food, create job opportunities, and build many, many more houses, infrastructure, industries. And this puts a lot of pressure on a lot of people and in many areas of our everyday life. Next slide, please. If we want to talk about the demand and compare it to something we understand, we could say that for the next 40 years, we'll have to build the floor equivalent of New York City every month. Next slide, please. Or if someone prefers the European context, that would be one city of Paris every week until 2060. Next slide, please. We know since a few years that construction sector is responsible for 39% of global carbon emission. Out of those, 28% is so-called operational carbon, meaning all the energy that we use and need to operate buildings for the lights, heating, cooling, all the electrical devices that we need to power, security, and so on and so forth. And the remaining 11% is so-called embodied carbon. And that is the energy that is required and needed to excavate the raw materials, produce materiality, building and construction components, transport them to the site, and then composite into a building. So if you turn around, we are all surrounded by embodied carbon. Next slide, please. Construction is also responsible for more than 50% of natural resources extracted from the Earth's crust every year. Next slide, please. As well as 50% of waste in landfill. EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, has calculated that in the context of United States, only in 2018, there were 600 million tons of construction and demolition waste produced, which was double as much as municipal waste. Next slide, please. These tendencies, catastrophic for environment and humanity, call for radical changes in the things we do things. Especially how we design, build, and deconstruct. It calls for a paradigm shift from unmatched linear economy of take, make, waste, or take, make, throw, as you see on the left side, which consumes finite resources to create materials, products, which then end up in landfill, and change it to circular economy, where both technical and biological cycles that you see here in the middle of the slide run in a constant loop. That is a model where resources are not wasted, but circulate without the change of their properties or quality or value. And this, in addition to that, is supported by regenerative resources. Next slide, please. The reuse and recycling is very much in an incredibly advanced stage for a developing country. And the kind of research and interest was compiled into a book called Building from Waste, co-written with Professor Dirk Hebel and Professor Felix Heisel. This book is kind of a catalog of 60+ materials that, as the book says, derive from waste. But by waste, we not only understood the things that you can find in a trash bin or a landfill, but also matter that at least this few years ago, 7 years ago, did not have value or was not considered as something that can be used in the industry. Next slide, please. I managed to secure most of the materials and samples, products that we described in the book. This created a really wonderful exhibition that traveled with us to different countries, different continents. I think we had 2 or 3 exhibitions in Zurich, Switzerland. There was an exhibition in Singapore, San Francisco, and New York. Those images, I think, come from San Francisco, 2015 again. What was really important for us is that we designed this exhibition so that all the elements are free to experience and explore with all the senses, mostly with the sense of sight and touch, but also smell. It actually happened once or twice that someone even experienced the materials through the sense of taste. That was my fault, because in the introduction, in the presentation, I was talking about a few of those materials and how healthy they are, and that they wouldn't have any negative impact in case it happened that a child would leak them. So we also have adults who are interested in that. Those events were always open to everyone. We didn't limit the entrance to the exhibition specifically for architects or designers or artists even. We very often had simply concerned citizens or activists attending those events and exhibitions, discussions, their voice was really, really strong, and this kind of started a very interesting exchange of information, knowledge, approaches to what is happening right now. Let's go to the next slide, please. Only one exhibition in New York was designed a bit different. As you see, we have this kind of glass cubes on top of them, simply because it was located outside, and the materials had to be protected from the outside elements. And this exhibition specifically was adjacent to a structure that we built as a kind of manifesto and case study based on what we've been talking about the book, the ideology that we've been following, called No Waste Vault. Let's go to the next slide. This pavilion, the structure, was commissioned by ETH Zurich University that we worked in at that point. And again, it was done with Professorship Hebel and Block Research Group, Professor Philip Block from ETH. And what was important for us is was looking very locally at the waste streams. And what kind of, we try to figure out what kind of resources would make sense for that location. And we are looking at the Tetra Pak waste, which by no means is not typical for New York only. It's the waste that you find all over the world. But we also wanted to collaborate with local industry, and we found this great company called Rewall, which was producing panels out of Tetra Pak. So I think the company right now is only doing roofing. A lot of things can change within 7 years. But in here, in the right image, you see 2 different colors of panels. Why recycling Tetra Pak? There is a way to recycle those, but since the packaging has 6 different layers, polyurethane, cardboard, and aluminium foil, they are interwoven between each other. It's extremely energy consuming process to do that, plus it takes a lot of water. So obviously that is not the most ideal scenario for recycling and reintroducing this separate materials into the system. So again, on the left side, on the right image, left side, you see the orange panels. The company selects or were segregating different containers according to color. And on the left side, you see the orange boxes, shredded and pressed in the heat press, and on the right side, milk cardboards. And because there are so many different materials, these panels do not need additional glue or binding agent, because plastic acts as the joinery binder. And on the left side, you see the finished pavilion over here that works fully in compression, stacked on top of shipping pallets. Let's quickly go to the next one. And then because of plastic, it's also waterproof because it has this plasticky layer on top. And with as I said, we wanted to send a message. So the whole idea was following the building for demolition notion of planning in such a way that we know what is going to happen with every element of the structure at the end of its life cycle. And here we have the stacks of the Tetra Pak panels already, the triangular modules already flat. That was a really positive aspect, that the company had a business model where they accepted their material back, where they could reshred it and create new panels and then sell them again. Shipping pallets are anyway known by everyone to have many lives, so I think we just borrowed them for a couple of weeks. And then, but if I want to be honest, we actually ended up with a little bit of waste. If you remembered from the previous image, the triangular modules were bound by plastic straps. We can also go quickly over there. That was a system that allowed us for quick demolition, quick disassembly. It's built for disassembly, that's how it is called. But in the end, we ended up with a handful of plastic straps. So again, something that we have kind of encountered, learned on our mistakes, and do our best not to ever repeat that again. How are we with time? Let's go to the next slide. And we jump into academia. At Cornell, I teach undergrads and graduate programs. And while in my design courses, we tackle different topics. Recently, a design course on Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. There's always a lot of room and the kind of push to think about sustainability, about locality, materials and structures that do make sense for specific geographical locations. While all my seminars circulate around, that's a good word, circulate around building materials. And I'm specifically looking at very innovative, alternative, and healthy materials. Many of them on the very beginning stages of development. So here in this seminar, fantastic materials and where to find them, from last semester only, each of the students looked at and some kind of existing materials, or some kind of notion that that already starts to grow, but it's not yet there. And with all the information, very small amount of information at hand, they try to understand the components, the technical properties, and reproduce those materials. Let's go to the next slide. I have three very quick examples. Hempline, two products that are biodegradable, that work really well together. The student, on top of testing different components, different gradient of the aggregate agricultural waste, she also tried different coloring systems to kind of also embrace the aesthetics of the material. And at the end, this material can very safely go into compost and act as a nutrient for new materials. Let's go to the next one. The material on the left, Malay Biocomposite, is already marketed product from India, one of many alternatives to leather and paper and fabric, here specifically leather, out of fermented coconut water mixed with bacteria. There's this beautiful smelly process to it, but in the end we come with products and matter that can be easily, without any harm and without bad conscience, be thrown away, ideally in the garden directly, where it decomposes and disappears without any harm to us humans or environment. And the last one, next slide. And a little bit more, I would say, out-of-the-box approach, looking at the animal waste in the context of Vancouver. One of the students visited the wet market a few times and tried to figure out how that waste can be incorporated into building industry. And here is one of her material samples that mixes animal blood with, she tested different aggregates from sand up to gravel, and bound together with glue that she kind of got out of the animal bones. But there's a different material that I'm even more interested in. Let's look at the next slide. This is image from 2 or 3 weeks ago, and this semester my students are looking specifically at fantastic material, highly popular since a few years, Mycelium, which is the vegetative part of mushroom. So all this beautiful roots that are spreading out in the soil. And why is it fantastic? It's because no one can decide, or I think it's already decided, it's neither plant nor animal. It kind of behaves like plant, but it has intelligence of animal. It can communicate. It can, through its network, help different species of trees and plants. And most of all, can bound in a very, biological way different agricultural waste products. And here we're just having a little bit of fun, but we were also commissioned by the university to create another exhibition. I feel like I'm mostly doing exhibitions now. So my students are right now actually trying to figure out new ways of new joinery systems that can be then scaled up maybe in the future in the building and industry, which is great. And the next slide. And this semester was kind of as a consequence and also inspired by a grant that we have recently secured with my partner, Professor Felix Heiser here at Architecture Department, together with really fantastic professors from different departments. We have 2 microbiologists, one biologist from the College of Agriculture and Life Science. We have a fiber and material expert from the Human Ecology College at Cornell as well, and one professor from a business school, because we do want to think about the whole picture of how materiality, new inventive materiality, can first of all work in the lab, then in the build industry, and then still be affordable and be a big competition to the materials that we really know well. And with that, I would like to thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to the Q&A session.
Thank you so much, Marta. It's a great speech. Thank you so much for all that information. Being circular is not easy. It's a path towards circularity and sustainability. And the path to decoupling production from the extraction of raw material is very hard, but it's one that we can do. Marta will be with us throughout the session, so she will be available for Q&A. So please use Slido to post your questions, and you can find the information for Slido in the chat. So welcome again, everyone. A lot of people have joined us since. Some brief notes about the rest of the session. So we will have 4 speakers. Each one will do a lightning quick presentation of 5 minutes each on their work and around circular economy. And then following, we'll have a couple of minutes. We'll have a couple of questions from me, but especially from the audience. And we will finish around 6:30 EST or 12:20 EST. So I will just present briefly our speakers. We will have presenting Melly Pullman, a visiting professor of the University of Groningen, an academic lead teaching at Academy in Groningen, and full professor at Portland State University. Then we'll have, followed by Dave Coleman, which is the managing director of Carbon Literacy Project, Cedric Hrigenbach, who is founder of the Fresque du Climat, and then last but not least, Red Shank, who is global head of sustainability solutions and engineering plastics at Covestro. So without further ado, Melly, the floor is yours.
Hi, I can't open my video. It says the host has muted me.
Oh, okay.
I had to log back on because my computer.
Okay, so I'm making you co-host once more.
Okay, great. I'm there. Okay, well, welcome everyone. I'm Melly Pullman. I guess we're ready for the next slide. I'm going to talk about education as a stepping stone. So the topics I want to discuss are kind of the channels of education that I've seen where sustainability and circular economy has been integrated. And I'm in a business school, so that's just going to come from the business school perspective. But what I'm wanting to illustrate is how people are exposed and then integrated through multiple approaches that I've seen. And so I've been working with this for about, I don't know, 10 years in education, and everything from full graduate programs down to course design. Next slide, please. So the first thing I want to discuss was the sustainable MBAs were really popular. A whole MBA program where every single class was devoted to sustainability. But what we've seen in the schools I've been involved with in the US is that there were definitely some challenges, and some of those schools have struggled to survive. So one of the pluses of having a sustainable MBA is that it's a great way for every single topic to be tied into social and environmental issues, and the cohort's all on the same page. And it creates this wonderful culture of sustainability, and everybody wants to be a sustainability-oriented entrepreneur. But the challenges are the enrollments have really dropped, and the students that came out of those programs had trouble finding jobs unless they started their own company. And there's been a big change in focus for many business schools towards business analytics. And from what I've seen, a lot of sustainability has been lost in the dust. And in most normal, MBA programs, or for example, I have a master's in supply chain program, there's only one sustainability course. Next slide, please. So I'm in supply chain management, and in many schools, this has become the home of sustainability because it's a great fit. There's a lot of different aspects of supply chain that touch on sustainability, from the consumer back to the raw materials. So it's a great tie-in for many, many topics, and you can definitely fill a whole course on sustainable supply chain management. There's been a lot of interest. Students really like to take it. So it's a great way to expose them is to kind of tilt the supply chain course towards sustainability. But there have been other homes for sustainability. For example, the strategy courses often can have a complete sustainability focus, and obviously ethics is a great location and where people can be exposed. Next slide, please. I have taken on the mantle of teaching food supply chain management, and that is very easy to have that incorporating all the environmental and social issues because it's so filled with them. Great case studies are available, and lots of interesting solutions. So it's not all pessimistic, although, as Marta's talking about, there's pessimistic sides to all of these fields. But we see a lot of areas for innovation. And for example, some areas I've been interested in, seafood packaging and plant-based products, have been really hot topics. So students get really engaged in those topics by coming in through food supply chain management. Next slide, please. A second course that we have created is one on social entrepreneurship, where it's part of a certificate program, and then right now we have it as an elective class for people who are in management, whether or not they want to get the certificate or not. But the advantage there is it gives a slightly different perspective, but because every week is tied into a UN SDG, then you get lots of great entrepreneurial ideas. There's tons of great speakers to talk about this locally and internationally. And we have a lot of student interest. I think that's a growing area. So a great area of influencing people's ideas for both being an entrepreneur in this space or working for existing social enterprises. Next slide, please. So what I've seen over the years is the landscape has changed. It's, as I said, it's shifted from, there was quite a lot of interest in sustainability in business schools starting 10 years ago. It's been a bit eclipsed by the analytics space, as I've mentioned, but there are new opportunities to expose students, and especially if you take some of the core courses that are required, like ethics, supply chain, and strategy, and really convert them into a space to talk about sustainability and create exposure. And then there's a lot of new ideas coming in there that are attractive in business schools, and like the social entrepreneurship, which is a great way to create more exposure. So that's my spiel.
Thank you so much, Melly. I already have some questions here for you after when everybody finishes presenting. I will now ask David Coleman from Carbon Literacy Project to present. Thank you, David.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dave Coleman. I'm Managing Director and co-founder of the Carbon Literacy Project, which started here in Manchester in the UK. So Marta already set out the fact we need a paradigm shift to address some of the global challenges that we are all familiar with. And Melly was just covering the fact that sometimes green issues and sustainability and circular economy gets a bit ghettoized, and people think, well, it's the job of that department or that kind of organization. But we all know actually we need to normalize this. And a few years ago, my co-founder and I, Phil Corbell, were talking about this with some other people and said, wouldn't it just be great if everybody just got it on this agenda? Wouldn't it be great if everybody just got it on climate change and on sustainability, and everybody started to act in concert, and everybody just got it, start to do the things we need to know? So we discussed what would be required for that to happen. Can I have my next slide, please? So we pulled together a working group of 30 people drawn from all walks of life: business, public sector, private sector, small, large, academia, community, someone from our local council, firefighters, radical campaigners. And we said, what would be required? What could we do with people that would help them get it? And that working group of people came up with a concept. We'd already used the term carbon literacy, and we got it into the Climate Change Action Plan for Manchester. But the problem was we didn't actually know what carbon literacy meant, and we'd made the term up. So we put this group together and we said, well, what is carbon literacy? And the working group, over a series of meetings, came up with this definition. It said if you were carbon literate, you'd have an awareness of the carbon costs and impacts of everyday activities. But being aware wasn't enough. You also had to have the ability and motivation to reduce emissions. And it's easy to try and motivate people by scaring them, but that's just not very positive. We needed people to be motivated in a positive way and recognize their level of agency, which was usually far greater than they realized. And this needed to work on an individual, community, and organizational basis. So that was all very well, but what did that mean? Well, that working group said we needed a day's worth of learning. We needed to spend some time so that people did certain things to get it and become carbon literate. Next slide, please. So we created this concept and a day's worth of learning. It would be learning that would be social learning, so it had to be immediately relevant to its audience. So we wouldn't create one training course. Each audience would, if you like, create its own training course. All carbon literacy courses would be consistent with one another, would have the same ingredients, but it was mandatory that they would all be adapted by the audience that was receiving them. So it would work in business or in community or in a school or in a university or a council or wherever it was delivered. We wouldn't deliver it with experts. We wouldn't try as sustainability professionals to deliver the messages, because they're much better received from people who feel like me, whoever I am. So it would be peer-to-peer delivery of champions within each audience. And there were a number of other requirements, but basically we set all of this out in the standard and said, if the training meets the requirements of the standard, we can give it a badge and say it meets the carbon literacy standard. Next slide, please. So the stuff that's mandatory and consistent everywhere is knowledge, some basic knowledge about climate change and sustainability. It's taken at different levels for different audiences, but all of the same core information is there. The learning method, that people find out and form their own solutions to the problems that are in front of them. We can inspire them, but they need to make their own solutions because they will come up with better answers for themselves than we would. It has to have certain values. about the values that working together we can and will make a difference, and a number of other things as well. And there must also be some action. This isn't a piece of learning that you can receive passively. You have to become active as part of your learning. Next slide, please. So you have to take two actions. One is an action that you formulate or even take as part of your day's learning, that you don't need anybody else's permission to do, that starts to move something on the sustainability agenda and address your climate change, so that you take responsibility for something that you're doing and change it. And the second action is an action that involves a wider group of people. So you take your carbon literacy and immediately start sharing it with others through the action that you take. And we know from psychological theory, when you start to take action as you learn something, it embeds that learning. And therefore, as part of this day's learning, people actually started to address climate change. And we wanted that to be in the context where the learning took place. So that's all very well in theory, but what would that look like in practice? Next slide, please. And one more slide, please. I forgot, I left a blank one there. So in practice, it looks like this. So 22,500 citizens, individual people, have been through this process, and we have certified them as being carbon literate because they did their day's worth of learning and they created their actions. As a result, more than 45,000 actions have been pledged and taken. We count only 2 per learner. In fact, most learners pledge many more actions than that, but we'll count them as 2 and be conservative. We have an accreditation scheme that we were asked to develop for organizations. That's quite recent, just more than 60 organizations have gone through, but there are now more than 2,000 organizations that have staff that are carbon literate. There's an accreditation scheme for training professionals if they want it, but it's not mandatory. Any smart citizen with access to the standard and the internet to go and find some materials can develop, create and deliver a carbon literacy course. It's being delivered in 14 different nations in depth. There are 10 different sectoral consortia within different industries that have adopted this as an approach and are cascading it out. As of this morning, there were actually, because this slide's a month or so old, there are now 260 different carbon literacy courses developed by audiences for their own people, consistent everywhere, but adapted everywhere. And we know from external research that people who become carbon literate save roughly somewhere between 5 and 15% of their resource footprint each year. Normally that's to do with carbon, sometimes it can be other resources. So that's the end of my slides. If you'd like to end the PowerPoint, why have I shared this with you and decided to spend my just over 5 minutes talking about this? It was to show that we can achieve things at scale. We can achieve the paradigm shift that we're talking about and that we need. By all means, by the way, take the PowerPoint down so you can just, I'll make you look at me instead. We can achieve at scale if we choose to, and we can do it at very low cost because we're actually a not-for-profit, we're a charity. It's possible to roll this out at scale very inexpensively, but it wins hearts and minds, and it takes people who are passionate and makes them even more passionate. It takes people who didn't realize that this was an issue for them and makes it relevant and makes them passionate. And it takes people that maybe might be opposing action on sustainability and shows them why actually their position is wrong, to at least make them neutral, if not supporters of action on climate change. But the final and most important point is that they always say the antidote to fear is action. And the antidote to fear about sustainability and fear about climate change is climate action. And this is a way of making it manifest at scale and at relatively low cost and actually going out there and making a difference. And that's it from me.
Thank you so much, Dave. It's a wonderful tool and a great framework. I have done it myself, and I can speak by your words. I did change my way of doing things in my personal and professional life, and for certainly my carbon footprint is much better after I did the carbon literacy course. I would now like to present Cedric Hrigenbach from the Climate Fresk project based in France. Welcome, Cedric.
Hello, can you hear me? Maybe I don't have any slides, so you can also switch off the screen sharing. And especially it's not my name written on your slide, but never mind, don't worry. Yes, thanks for the invitation. I'm Cedric Hrigenbach, and I'm the chairman of the association, the NGO called the Climate Fresk. And its name is based on the name of a tool, a workshop, kind of game that I invented a few years ago. So to put it in context, I teach climate change for more than 10 years. And one day I wanted to do something that is different from a top-down approach, and I was fed up with only giving lessons this way, and I tried something. I printed a few graphs from IPCC review, and I gave them to my students, and I asked them to put them in order of cause and effect. And then I just watched them playing, and I was listening to them, and then I was listening to their conversation, and I thought, well, what's going on in their brain right now is precisely how it works when you want to learn something. Because they were facing questions, hesitating, making mistakes, correcting themselves, etc. And it was a collaborative exercise. And I decided that I would use this workshop every time I was teaching climate change from that moment on. And a few years later, I had sometimes the opportunity to lend this workshop to friends of mine who were also teaching climate change. And they told me, well, it's amazing because I'm not a climate expert, but with your workshop, it works by itself. And it's great because people have fun and they learn a lot. And even if I'm not a teacher myself. So years later, I had the opportunity to have 900 students play the game during only one morning. So that was a bit of a challenge because I had to recruit 30 moderators. So I managed to do it. And that day, these 30 moderators arrived in front of a classroom of 30 people. So there were five tables of 6 people. So we had to moderate 5 tables at the same time. While 2 weeks before, they didn't even know about the workshop. And it went well. So that morning, I knew that this workshop was able to scale up, to really scale up. And a few weeks later, I announced that we would use it with 1 million people. The only thing is that I didn't know if it would take 3 years or 10 years, but I knew we could do it. And now we are more than halfway because we have reached more than 200,000 people. 200,000 people who have paid. Maybe much more than that, in fact, because it's based on a form that not everybody fills in. But still, it's spreading very, very quick. And the reason why it's spreading quick is because you play the workshop, so you really understand what's about climate change. So you understand the human activities, the CO2 emissions, the impact on the temperature, the consequences of increasing temperature, etc. And then you see the consequences on human beings at the end. And so it's, for many people, it's really shocking. They thought they knew about climate change. So first they discovered that they didn't know that much. And secondly, they realized that it's much more important than what they thought initially. And so part of the people who play become moderator after a few days or a few weeks. And for this reason, we are spreading very, very quick. We double all the figures. We double all the figures every 6 months or something. So why do I think it's important to talk about climate change? With COVID, we understood that when you have a global issue, because COVID is a global issue like climate change, the solution is a question of individual behavior. And if you have only a few people who don't behave the right way, then you have consequences for all the rest of the people. And with climate change, it's the same. So individual behavior won't be enough. Because we need to change the rules at a certain point. People won't follow the rules by themselves. So you have to change the rules, to change the laws, even sometimes. The point is, when you do that, it's not very comfortable. It's not very comfortable for people. It's not nice, and some people in this moment tend to listen to the one who say, we're not sure about it. The vaccine, it's not very safe. Maybe it's dangerous, etc. So you are tempted to listen to the people who deny science in the very moment when you have to apply new rules that you don't really like. And I think it could be the same with climate change. It could be the same because in a few months, in a few years, when we really have political decision makers that are that are conscious of the stake, then they will pass some laws that won't be comfortable for everybody. And that day, some people may listen to the climate deniers again, because it's much more comfortable to deny all of these things. So we need to get ready, and we need to try to organize a collective immunity against climate deniers. And that's why we are very motivated with my association to spread knowledge about climate change all around the world. So far, there are 10,000 people who have been trained as moderators. And we are present in 40, I think now it's 50 countries. It's translated in 35 languages. And we are today, I'm in Glasgow, because we are present at the next COP. At the moment, it's a conference of youth. So we are meeting many young people from everywhere in the world. And on Monday, there will be the next COP, where we intend to find officials from different countries and ask for their help to spread the game in more countries. So that's it for me. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Cedric. And I have also done the climate fresk and also like the carbon literacy. I'm actually facilitator for both the carbon literacy and the climate fresk in Amsterdam, and they're great tools and a great way to start a knowledge base and get people in the movement of being informed and having tools for decision making. So last but not least, now a more corporate view from Roy Chang. So Roy Chang is Global Head of Sustainability Solutions from Covestro. Thank you so much, Roy. I believe Roy will be not sharing slides also, so we can show Roy.
Or my picture, I don't mind. Thank you very much. Good evening from Shanghai. It's almost midnight over here, but the night is still young in a city like this. So very happy to maybe representing the practitioner side of fighting over climate change or circular economy, and from the corporate or from the organization perspective. And maybe before that, maybe just a 30-second introduction of what Covestro does, right? So we are a material science company. We make materials like engineered plastics, where I belong to as a business unit. And these materials are serving the industries like automotive, constructions, electronics, healthcare, et cetera, for a wide range. And most of these industries, unfortunately, are also the heavyweight champions in terms of carbon footprint. And from carbon footprint perspective, we are basically the scope 3 emission of them, right, from supply chain perspective. So it is a very important topic for a material company like ours in terms of climate change and reducing carbon footprint for the entire value chain. So maybe that's the background. 2 years ago, our company launched a new vision. We called it "We Will Be Fully Circular." So full circularity was the vision that we were striving for, followed by a series of carbon footprint reduction goals. And the relationship between carbon footprint reduction and circular economy, I think Ellen MacArthur Foundation put it very nicely already. Half of the contribution of carbon footprint reduction would be coming from the circular economy model, while the other half would be on renewable energy. So when we, from a corporate perspective, talking about fully circular, we focus on 4 areas. We will use renewable energy because ourselves, like the chemical industry, is also a heavyweight in terms of being energy intensive. So we're switching to a lot of renewable energy and clean energy in the production of our materials. That's number 1. Number 2 is to reduce our own carbon footprint from product perspective, using what we call waste-based materials or recycled materials, as simple as that. or replacing fossil fuel resources, because again, from the chemistry industry, we also inherit quite a lot of carbon footprint from the fossil fuel resources. So we're replacing them with, for example, bio-based materials, bio-waste, raw materials, etc., etc. And we cannot talk about circular economy without recycling. So again, as a chemical industry, we are also heavily investing on different recycling technologies to sort of close the material loop, to make our materials more circular, to increase the recycling rate of the materials. And last but not least, the fourth area of focus to achieve full circularity is collaborations, because we cannot achieve fully circular or circular economy alone. So we have quite a lot of extensive collaborations, and I'm not going to go through them right now in less than 5 minutes. So give you a taste of how we want to achieve fully circular, to achieve our sustainability goals for the value chain. And to give you a perspective, we are almost 11 billion euro turnover company with 17,000 employees. So to achieve fully circular as an organization, you can feel that the scale is pretty hefty here. And talking about sustainability literacy or carbon literacy, like what Sergio introduced earlier on in this session, is about mindset, knowledge, and skill set. And for me, my takeaway about that would be tackling the why, the what's, and the how's within the organization, both from top down and bottom up. And I can speak forever, right? Why we need to produce more, we need to sell more, we need to achieve more, but with less, right? With lower carbon footprint. I think the entire organization needs to understand that, why we need to do that. Or the what, right? What is carbon footprint? What is scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emission? Those basic knowledge, right? What is life cycle assessment? And then the how, right? How do we calculate our own scope 1, 2, 3 emission? How do we reduce the carbon footprint reduction? All these knowledge, mindset, skill sets need to be fulfilled. So I don't have the answer right now. From a practitioner perspective, I'm happy that joining me in the panelists, we have the educators, we have workshop facilitators, even entrepreneurs tackling carbon literacy, or in fact raising the awareness or the knowledge and skill set about sustainability, and I'm looking forward to the exchange right after. So maybe I'll stop here, and maybe you can do leave some more time for Q&A.
Thank you so much, Roy. So I will start directly with some questions from the public. So first one for Marta. So Marta, for residential single family, between brackets, housing, is it better to retrofit an old house or knock it down and build an energy efficient structure from the ground up?
That's a very good question, and it's not so easy to answer. That really depends on so many different factors. Most of all, what the quality of the existing materials and the layers of the building are, which requires a little bit of testing, experts who can professionally assess the performance and the value of the materiality. But if we are looking at the developed parts of our country, I would say retrofitting, but also with not just patchworking it with some kind of random materials, but already whatever we are doing should be considered to, we should consider basically the life cycle of the materiality. So what is actually going to happen even to those new parts of the house or new layers of the house after 30 years. Otherwise, building from scratch also makes sense, as long as all these different notions, different tactics that I mentioned and can still add to those would be put into consideration. So the longevity of the materiality, I would like to maybe mention life cycle assessment, LCA, known probably to most of you. Basically knowledge and kind of responsibility usually from the producer side of that material, what is going to happen at the end of its life. And then basically building very consciously selecting the materiality, consciously using the land as well. Maybe I will just very quickly add to that.
Using
since
local
we are
products,
all,
I guess, right?
Yes, locality as well to reduce the transportation. So locality is extremely important. But also what I wanted to mention is that there are already a lot of areas in Europe which do not allow single family houses. So something that we also have to take into consideration, the American dream is kind of slowly coming to the end. Well, definitely most of the buildings that are going to happen, domestic ones, are going to be multi-family buildings, houses, which doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be much worse.
So we're transitioning
I don't know if that
from
answered the question. I can just keep going, but I just threw a couple of things into the discussion.
So we're transitioning from growth without limits through growth within limits. Cedric, I see that you have raised your hand.
Yes. So it's true that it depends on many things, but by saying that, then you won't have much of an answer. So sorry about it. It's true, depending on many things, but still, I would say that most of the time, yes, it's better to retrofit a house rather than building a new house. But what do you compare when you look at the two scenarios? Do you look at the carbon footprint of your own house, which could be a new one or a retrofitted one? Or do you zoom out and do you look at the global scenario? Because this house that you could retrofit, if you don't do it, maybe this house will go on like this, being a disaster, an ecological disaster, and somebody else will live in it without retrofitting it. And so that would be very bad for the planet. So when you buy this house and you retrofit it, then you decrease its carbon footprint. So maybe your own carbon footprint would be worse than if you build a new one, but you improve things on the global scale. The biggest challenge in houses is not the new ones, it's to retrofit the stock. So building new houses will only be new surfaces, new carbon footprint. Retrofitting the stock is the solution if you really want to decrease the carbon emissions of this sector, of the building sectors.
Thank you for your insight, Cedric. Now a question for Melly. What does the future of sustainability supply chain tracking and consulting look like?
That's a good question. I think it looks pretty healthy because there are many people that lack the skills in doing these things. I'll just keep it short at that. So they need to hire consultants that have gained the skills of doing these kinds of things.
Okay, so I'll add another question to that, Melly. How do we steer consumers and the industry towards the need of building a sustainable food supply chain? How do we create the will for that to happen?
You know, it's an interesting question because we struggle with that. I'm just going to use fish as the example. You know, we had influencers. We'll just talk about Northern Hemisphere types of problems. Influencers such as chefs were really good at educating the consumers in restaurants, but we saw during the pandemic that restaurants didn't have the ability to be open and do that influencing. So where did the influencing come from? Well, Netflix was quite effective with both the octopus movie, what's it called? My Octopus Teacher, and of course, Seaspiracy, which seems to have been widely watched by many people who then changed their practices in terms of seafood consumption and now are quite aware. The other thing that I'm considering in terms of consumers is looking at the collaboration of supply chain partners involved with seafood, all the way from the boats to the consumer, that there needs to be, well, there's starting to emerge a lot of people are quite concerned with connecting everyone involved with that so that the consumers actually know what's going on, but the people that are touching the seafood throughout the chain have to get involved together to solve the problems. So I think that's a really hopeful area, because generally I don't see market solutions being that effective right now, especially in the Southern Hemisphere, and that regulatory solutions are neglected. So we have to look at some of the other ways to influence what people are seeing. And I'd say the supply chain partners are the best way, especially bigger players who get on board with this. And they are pressured by the consumers who watch media and get upset about what's going on. So that's my take.
It's a big system to change, and we do need a systemic change. Now a question for Dave. Actually, I think I'll consolidate 2 questions in one. Is the climate literacy certification open? And what are the 5 individual activities that one can do to reduce their carbon emissions?
So the first thing I'd say is we have a special swear box for people that accidentally call us climate literacy, because we're the carbon literacy project. So you owe us £1. Is it open? I'm not quite sure what the questioner means by open. Anybody can download a copy of the standard, follow the processes in it, and deliberately it was designed to be democratic. So I know a few people have actually been asking, I believe in the text, how do you become a carbon literacy trainer, or how do you get certified as a trainer? So the first thing is you don't need to be certified as a carbon literacy trainer to train anybody else. Because I only had 5 minutes, I was going very quickly. But any smart citizen can download a copy of the standard, read what the contents are. If you go to our website, which is carbonliteracy.com, there's an infographic that talks you through all of the processes. So I'm not going to go through all of that now. But anybody can create a course that falls in line with the standard. You have to accredit the course with us, and there's a small cost to do that. We're not for profit. That's actually one of the ways that we have to support ourselves. For corporates, it's moderately expensive. For small or not funded community groups, it's actually free, and there's a sliding scale between those 2 things. So you credit your course, and then you can start delivering carbon literacy to other people. There is a cost to certifying individuals as carbon literate. So again, it's very inexpensive, and if you're in a community setting, there are ways of doing it very cheaply. But basically, it's I guess it's about £10, about $15 per individual to certify an individual as being carbon literate. And what happens is someone does their learning, creates a little portfolio of evidence that's done as part of the learning. It's submitted to us electronically, and we then make a certification and basically say either this person's carbon literate or they aren't. So you don't get a carbon literacy certificate for attendance. It's not that kind of certificate. There is actually an assessment that's part of that process. But that means that we know that all of those learners, the 22.5, actually now 23,000 learners, have been certified as carbon literate. That's how we know, because we look at their evidence. We know they're consistent. We know they've met the standard. That's why we do it that way. So that was the certification question. And I think the standard question. Have I answered everything you wanted there, Sergio?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dave. Now a question for Roy. In your opinion, what is the biggest challenge when you want to monetize circular economy into your end products? So I think this question speaks also to the triple bottom line. So of course, to be sustainable, you also have to be profitable. So
yeah, my boss keeps asking me this question, which is a multi-million-dollar question. And I usually think about these, right? So 3 questions we ask ourselves, right? Is there a market for sustainable solutions, right? Do people want it? Do our customers want them, right? Oftentimes we do a lot of inside-out sales. So, we make this great product, which is low carbon footprint, yada, yada. But at the end of the day, if this is not the customers want, then nobody's going to buy it, right? So fact check if there's a market there. Do people want it? The truth is, the good news is our sustainable solutions business actually growing much faster than the quote unquote non-sustainable solutions, right? So check number 1. Number 2, can we really do it, right? Do we have the right capabilities? From a linear economy model to a circular economy model, as an organization, we need to change and transform a lot of capabilities. For example, we are so good at making what we call virgin materials, but now circular economy, achieving fully circular, we need to enter in one way or another, recycling business. And we knew nothing about recycling business until recently, right? So we're learning to a point we need to decide as a company, do we really want to get ourselves even further down to the recycling path? Yeah. So this is a completely different skill set, capability, so to speak, that we may need to capture. And if the above two questions are answered, then maybe making money, right? So can we profit from this would be relatively easier, right? We have the market and we are able to do it. Then we need to just struggle a little bit to, make higher margin, lower down the cost, et cetera, the profit part. But the fundamental motivation is really the other two pieces, right? People and planet. Otherwise, we don't have a market. So, yeah, not sure if I answered the question.
Thank you so much. Cedric, one of the strong points of the climate fresk, and I've seen that firsthand, is scalability, as you said, and very well. Because people, especially in companies, but when they actually are interested in climate change and when they are aware, they really want to make the fastest impact as they can. Although you have had already a tremendous success with deploying Climate Fresk, what do you find are the barriers that you face towards upscaling it massively?
I don't know, because it's, I tend to see the half full glass rather than the half empty glass. So I'm amazed every day to see how powerful this project is. The energy of the community, of the 10,000 people who are moderators today, the tens of people who are coming to Glasgow next week for the COP. There will be 150 people joining here in Glasgow from the community, from the Fresk community. It's really amazing. We grow very quick, and that's an issue because, for instance, the team is growing very fast and is working under very, very high pressure. They are all very motivated by the project, so they put the pressure on themselves alone because they know we can have an impact on the world with that project. So they put a lot of pressure on themselves, and the fact that we grow very quick is quite hard for them. We also have a difficulty to raise money from different business model than the one we have. By the way, our business model is that when you charge a company with a climate risk, you have to give 10% back to the association because you can make money with that workshop. So it's done for that. You can. Some people make a living with it, not only me. So we give 10% back to the association. Plus, when a company does it internally, they have to pay €3 per participant also to the association. And it's a lot of money for the association, and that's the reason why it's growing very quick, and it's the project is able to be standing alone. Mm-hmm. But the difficulty of such a growth is that it's very difficult for us to reach public money, because when we show figures about our activity, it's figures from last year, and by the time we get the money, our budget has increased so much that this money is ridiculous compared to our real needs. So we don't waste time seeking public money for this result. We don't really do it, and we never succeed in doing it so far. So that's one of the drawbacks. But it's not a limit to the increase. The limit is maybe people don't take us seriously enough because we are very young. Yeah. And politics and teachers and many people who could pay more attention to that project. It's just a question of time. They will do it later. It's okay.
Yes, thank you so much. I think probably Dave will also have an opinion about that for sure. But let me also put in another question, Dave, which is towards one of the strong points of the carbon literacy. So making climate change local, actionable, and close to the hearts and minds are really one of the strong points of carbon literacy. And again, I saw that firsthand. So because carbon literacy, when you get certified to do carbon literacy training, it's for a certain area. So you explain to the people locally what's going on there, what people near them are doing, what are the consequences for them close to home, so close to their hearts, close to their eyes. How can we make people care about climate change before its consequences reach them? And again, to launch into Cedric's question, how do you upscale?
Wow, you've asked me quite a lot in that question. There's at least 3 parts. By the way, I'm sorry it's getting dark here. It's not me trying to save energy. It's literally just that the sun's going down. I can also say, Cedric, I was listening and nodding all the way through thinking, yeah, we don't go after public money for exactly the same reason. We're trying to expand at a crazy rate. Everything's always in arrears. We're not for profit. Therefore, we go with private companies that sponsor us to do our work, and the small amount of money that we get for certification of individuals and courses. So coming back out of that, how do we kind of make it relevant to people before the consequences become too disastrous? I'd argue that consequences are obvious enough as it is. So what we do is we show, as part of the training, you show people from any particular audience some of the impacts that are already happening to people like them. And that might be geographically, which you've kind of covered, but it's also, when we talk about local, that might be local in the sense of in the same profession, people who do the same job, people who have the same interests, might be from the same faith group. So training will show them impacts that are already happening on people like them, and that's why they should be already concerned. So I don't think we need any more impacts. I think the case is clear enough as it already stands. I'll give you a real life example. We did very quickly. We did a piece of training for the leaders of the regional authorities around Greater Manchester, this part of the north of England. So if you like, they're the city mayors and the chief executives of those councils, and there are 10 of them. So we did a special training course because we were asked to do it by some of them. And the idea was to do it just for them as the leaders of our whole political structure. And we would also get in the chief execs of all of the people they work with, so fire, police, ambulance, university, big commercial enterprises. So we got them all in a room. We didn't get quite all of them, but we got most of them. And I did a thing at the start and basically said to them, okay, we're going to do all about climate change, but first of all, can anybody just cover off, if you're not affected by climate change, just stick your hand up if your sector or your job or the place you live isn't particularly affected by climate change yet. Anybody? Come on, must be somebody. And no one put their hands up. And it was really interesting because we all looked at each other and they were thinking, I know I'm affected, but I didn't think you were. And then we went round and the fire chief said, they've spent more time now rescuing people from floods than they did putting out fires. And the person from health said, you know what, every time there's a 1 degree increase in temperature in the summer, we have more hospital admissions with people who can't breathe. And the police chief said for every 1 degree centigrade, they can map the increasing number of arrests due to people getting hot, drinking more alcohol, fighting, being too hot, blah, blah, blah. And we went around the entire group and everybody could say how affected they were. And what they hadn't realized was how affected everybody else was. And it was a breakthrough moment for all of them because they suddenly thought, you know what, we're all affected. We need to work together on this. So I don't think we need any more evidence. I think we just need to take the evidence we've got and present it in a compelling way. I think I've forgotten the third part of the question. Sorry, Cedric.
No problem. So I was linking to Cedric for the question that I made to Cedric. How could you also, what are your thoughts in upscaling, Dave?
Yeah. So for the last 5 years, we have doubled in size every 20 months. So that means the total number of people who are certified as carbon literate doubles every 20 months. So it's 50% compound growth every year. So in the commercial world, which I come from, we'd regard that as kind of fairly meteoric. So the thing we've got is scalable. So for us, the challenges are about finding the funding we need to invest the time to work with new sectors and communities. But the way that we've reached a lot of people is by creating toolkits, working with people in a sector or an industry that we then give to that industry, and then the industry rolls it out. So we were actually funded, we got a small amount of public funding, which was the first public funding we took from the UK government to create courses for sectors of our public sector. So every local authority in the UK now has access to a free toolkit that the government funded us just to assemble for them. We wrote it with local authorities, so they put their own content into it. It's also adaptable, so there's space for them to put their own content in. And now, 200 local authorities across the whole of the UK can all do carbon literacy in parallel. So we've got 40 of them now, because we released the toolkit about 9 months ago, who are all using the same toolkit, but now we're forming groups where they're talking to each other to support each other with training and people working for adjacent councils to accelerate the rollout. And that's the same carbon literacy that their car manufacturers who are in their place are using, the same as the hospital is using because we've worked with the NHS, the same as the university is using because we're working with universities globally. So that's the way we scaled it up, by creating resources that people can share and collaborate, because always the whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
Okay. So we have 4 minutes left into our session. Times go by really fast. I'll just keep going on this trend and ask a question and ask for a quick answer, both again to you and to Cedric. Of course, you said you didn't depend on public funding and that was not part of your business plan, but is there in fact any support for green publishing or green literature or for the approach that you both have developed? Is there support that you can find?
I'll give you one sentence and let Cedric come in. Not that I know of, but we've recently been approached by a global publishing house that's interested in adopting carbon literacy. So the way we work is we work with a big organization and we then encourage them to cascade it out. So there might be something in the future, but I don't know of anything now.
Okay.
Excuse me, I didn't really get the question. Can you?
I was just asking for a quick question and a very quick answer because we are ending. You said you didn't depend on public funding, but again, is there any funding available for publishing or for educational models around sustainability?
Oh, yes. There are plenty of fundings, I guess, for that, but it takes time to apply. And it takes sometimes days and weeks to apply to this kind of fundings. But if you have a project and it's the only way for you to be financed, go ahead and get that funding.
Thank you so much. So I will just wrap up quickly, and I will give the floor to Marta. But before this, I would just like to say that the recording of this session will be available shortly after. I would like to thank especially Cedric Hrigenbach and Akirti Madan and Sharuvi Begavani for helping putting together this symposium. Announce that our next sustainability topic, circular economy topic, will be startups in the circular economy, and that we'll be having podcasts and event plus activities where we'll be inviting people to coming in for interviews. And if you want to reach out to us to be part of our team and help us push the circular economy forward, please do so. And now, please, I would ask Marta just for a quick wrap up in the last minute of the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. First of all, I wanted to thank Sergio and his team for organizing this event. What a timely and important topics that have been discussed in here. And I'm really happy that it's just a small portion of a very big picture and obviously one session of many. I feel like Dave already summarizes in a really beautiful way. I think that for me personally, the most important aspect is to really understand that everyone is affected by climate change, that everyone should be part of this paradigm shift that we've been talking about. So maybe I will just mention the fact that we didn't mention that the sustainability is not a new idea, new aspect. It actually comes from 17th century Germany and the notion of Nachhaltigkeit. But the sustainability that we know and we use right now is around 30 years old. So it has been with us anyhow for quite a long time. And as much as Migi mentioned that maybe the interest in seminars and circular economy are going up and down, this is, I think, completely normal. From my experience, it's definitely a very positive change, and there's a lot of interest in, again, sustainability, circular economy, the approach of being resourceful in designing and using is definitely growing. And just a few days ago, in our department, we've been discussing how we can integrate these different aspects into the core classes. And I think that Sergio mentioned already, carbon footprint is definitely changing. It can start with becoming a vegetarian, but it also could be just simply trying to produce less waste. And I wanted to thank you once again, everyone, for joining us. And please feel free to contact me if you have any further questions. Thank you so much.